Starting Point Photography segment for Wednesday, November the 7th, 2018. Thanks very much for joining us. We talked, well, 2 weeks ago on the show about street photography. And we talked in the general idea of what street photography is and some of the tips and techniques you can use for street photography. This came up because Melissa was asking about this because this is something that we're going to be doing a fair amount of when we are in Lisbon. It is a city, it is an urban environment. There is a lot of places that we'll go when we're in Lisbon next March that are just wandering around the city looking at that particular city and trying to capture whatever you see, whatever you find attractive or interesting or picturesque in the city. And one of the things I love about street photography, especially with groups, is how we can all be in the same place but see completely different things. It's really neat. I've been on a lot of photo walks with people, and then when they post their photos afterwards, you come back and you look at their stuff and you go, I was right there. I did not see that thing that you took this beautiful image of. So I really love. It's kind of like looking through someone else's eyes when you do street photography with a group of people. Melissa found this great website on Google Street View. Sorry, Google Street Photography Lisbon. It's a whole bunch of Lisbon shots, and I'll create a link for you guys so you can see some of the photos that we're going to be talking about. I'll post these into the IRC chat room so you guys can follow along with what I'm talking about or what we're talking about. I'm going to cover up my wife's beautiful face while I show off some of these photos. Hang on a second. Let me escape out of this and then put this in her face. As you can see, a lot of people think or believe, rightfully or wrongly, that street photography needs to be in black and white. And that's quite often the case, if only because for a lot of street photography, a lot of it is images of people. And for whatever reason, quite often people are more interesting in black and white than they are in color. Not always, but quite often they are. I always, whenever I shoot people, I will either go and shoot with the idea of shooting in black and white, in which case I can turn my camera into a black and white camera. By the way, you can do that too, whether you're using your iPhone or you're using your DSLR. Many DSLRs have the ability to let you shoot in black and white. So in your viewfinder, you're actually looking at a black and white image as opposed to shooting in color and then in your photo editing app changing it into black and white. Same with the iPhone. You can shoot with the iPhone using the filters and you can shoot in black and white. And it's interesting because when you go out with the express purpose of shooting in black and white, you look at the world in a different way. You're not looking for color. You actually have to block color out. As human beings, we are naturally drawn. Our eyes are naturally drawn to color and colorful things. And you kind of, if you're shooting intentionally for black and white, you got to kind of block that out. When you're shooting in black and white intentionally, you're looking for contrast, you're looking for texture, you're looking for shadow and light and the play of those two things on objects and on people's faces. So you can either shoot in black and white or you can take your photos, post-process them in black and white. There's no right way or wrong way to do it, one way or the other. I think whenever I shoot people, if I shoot them in color, I use Lightroom. I will always tap in the Lightroom black and white tab just to get a sense of what this image might look like in black and white. Sometimes it works better that way. But obviously, if I'm shooting intentionally with black and white, I'm obviously not going to do that. So some of these shots you can see that are on this Google Photography Lisbon page that Melissa found, some of them are definitely in black and white images and look really, really interesting. I like some of them. Was there anything here that you particularly liked,
Oh,
Melissa?
I can't remember now. It was a while ago that I.
This is one of those shots that you can get by staying in one place and pointing your camera at the Oh, look at this. Just happened to click on a 2-day Lisbon travel and street photography workshop for £1,800 for 2 days. Are you kidding me? 2 days. That's ridiculous.
I think there's one of him instructing there. Where is it? The photographer.
But this is the kind of shot that the photographer, I guarantee you the photographer is standing in that one place, probably just standing there waiting, looking down that street, and sees this guy walking towards him and very patiently waits. You don't draw I can tell by the look on the guy's face, the subject's face, he's probably either ignoring the photographer or hasn't seen the photographer. He's got no interest in the photographer, and that's okay. If that's what the photographer wants, if that's the effect he wants to get. And if that being the case, then the photographer undoubtedly isn't pointing his camera at this guy. He's not standing there with the camera up to his eye waiting for this guy to come towards him, because that looks too obvious. This is the kind of thing that we talked about on the show 2 weeks ago, of you have your camera set already for all the settings that you need, whether that be your ISO is set properly, your shutter speed is set properly, your aperture, all that stuff is already preset. So that all you have to do is pretty much your camera becomes a point and shoot. When he gets to that spot that you want, you lift your camera and click. You might not even have to lift your camera. If you've got a wide angle lens, you can hold the camera at hip height or chest height and shoot the photo that way. I've told the story often of my friend Tony Rosario, who does that in New York City. He does all of his photography from the hip or from the chest. He takes some great, amazing images. So keep that in mind. You don't necessarily, you want to be ready for the shot well before the shot actually happens. I like the look on the guy's face. One of the things I love doing, and this is an example of that, is this idea of catching reflections of people in. Sorry, I didn't get this lady. Where's that shot? Come on, I should have clicked right to the shot. Okay, I didn't. So you can see this image of this woman who is looking possibly wistfully off to the side while she looks at this through this window. Another example of where you are, as the photographer, you've pre-focused on that spot on the window. You've already maybe taken a couple of test shots, and you're just waiting for someone to move into your frame. You're not being obvious. You're not standing with the camera pointing at that spot in the window, because if you had been, this lady wouldn't have walked into your shot. She wouldn't have gotten in the way. You might have shot over her shoulder, waited for someone to walk into the shot, and then shot over her shoulder. One of my favorite shots was something similar to this here in downtown Vancouver, and I shot it in black and white. And there was this lady looking in the window of the Salvatore Ferragamo store, the beautiful shoe store downtown Vancouver. And you could see she had one hand just looking at these shoes with I could see a reflection in the glass with this most wistful look on her face. Like she really, really wanted to buy these shoes, but she knows she can't afford them. And she stood there for a good 2 or 3 minutes. This wasn't her walking by and going, "Oh, those are pretty," and continuing. She was staring at these shoes. And I took this shot over her shoulder. I didn't get her reflection in the glass like I wanted to, but I did get the Salvatore Ferragamo sign. I did get her facial expression. I loved that shot. But it was because I had my camera was already set up for the street photography. I had pre-focused on that distance, so I knew everything that was 10 to 15 feet away from me.
I'm so sorry. I was looking up a guy's street photography course. Go on.
So this is another example of when you're doing street photography, you got to be prepared ahead of time. A lot of it's you got to know your camera, you got to know what you want to shoot, you got to know this stuff ahead of time. You can't expect your subject in street photography to wait for you to take 15 test shots and dial in your settings. You have to know ahead of time. So you got to know what you're going to shoot. You got to know how you're going to shoot it, well ahead of time. This is one of those shots where I think this is really interesting because you can see that these are two old guys sitting on a bench is universal. Everywhere in the world, you can find two old guys sitting on a bench. It's the easiest shot in the world to get. But you can see this guy probably has just spotted the photographer. And I'd be interested to know what happened afterwards. Did the guy smile? Did he give them a dirty look? Why? Well, what would have happened afterwards? But right there in this shot, the photographer has caught them in that instance. And again, that's because he was ready. She was ready to take the shot. Their camera was set up to get this shot. They were looking for these kinds of shots. So preparation. I love the look on the guy's face. Just these two old guys just sitting there. Mm-hmm. So these are all people shots. Another example. By the way, these are all shots of shot in and around Lisbon. Mm-hmm. This is one of those ones where you want to ask the story of the hell is going on here. What if they made a human ladder to either get up into or look through this window? For me, it doesn't look like it's real. It doesn't look like that the people on the bottom can actually hold up in this position all these other people. But it's an interesting shot, and it's one of those shots that isn't going to happen around. It isn't going to be around very long. You better take this shot right away.
Oh yes,
this is not a shot that's going to linger for very long. Now here's a shot of a guy who obviously sees the photographer, knows he's having his picture taken, and is probably okay with it. This feels like he's pretty up close to the photographer, or the. This is not a long lens. He's not zoomed in 200 millimeters or anything else like that. The photographer's standing within probably 4 or 5 feet, if that, of this guy. Maybe he's asked permission, and asking permission is your choice as the photographer. It often depends on how brave is the wrong word, but I guess that's kind of the sense I'm thinking of. It's often a matter of how willing you are to be rejected, and how willing you are to be rejected in ways that may be uncomfortable for you. I'm okay if somebody yells at me on the street. If someone curses me, "Don't take my picture!" I'm okay with that. Because I'm a big guy. I've got no problem with that. But other people may not be so comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable with that, then you can be a different kind of shooter. And that kind of shooter is someone who would ask permission. Excuse me, would you mind if I take your photo? Simple as that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we're going to do, I don't know if I've talked about this before on the show, in our photography workshop in Lisbon, we're going to have several days, or we're going to be walking around together, you and I, Melissa, the gang, but we'll have one day of street photography focused on that, or one morning of street photography. And Monty says, yeah, but you're 6'2", not as easy to yell at, you being intimidating. Exactly. I'm not worried about that. So we're going to have one day of street photography. And on that day, you feel free to, first of all, I think being with a group, you'll be a little braver, but you'll also be able to ask me to ask them to take their picture. All you'll have to do is walk up to me and going, hey, I think that person's got a really great face. Do you mind if you can we shoot them? And I'll say, not a problem. I'll walk up to them. I'll have my little translator. First thing I'll say is, do you speak English?
Yes.
And if they don't, then I'll have my little Portuguese translator app that will say, we think you've got a great face. Would you mind if we take your picture? So I'll take that tension away from the shot for you. And like we did when we were on Granville Street that day, taking pictures of the ladies in the cool Fascinator hats, I'll keep them. They'll be more likely to be comfortable having their picture taken if they're distracted. And so my job is going to be to try to distract the person, not in Portuguese, but I'll try to find some way to distract them from staring at you, and you not have to worry about it. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time with any one person. So you're going to have to be ready to take the shots. We're not going to ask someone to, would you mind standing here for 5 minutes while we dial in our settings on our shots? We're going to go boom, 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 take 2 or 3 shots, say thank you, and move on. I see there's a question in the chat room. No?
Psst, hey, Melissa, get the ball guy to ask those people who are apparently on their first date if we can take their picture.
And I wouldn't have a problem with that. I would not have a problem with that at all. If there was there's a shot here of a couple. There they are, right here. I think this is a really interesting shot with her looking away, the skater kids in behind watching them. It's an interesting photo. I wouldn't have taken this photo, but if this was an example of that, I would have no problem walking up to them going, "Hey, would you guys mind if we took a couple pictures of you? We're, a couple of photographers who want to take shots." Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, she doesn't look like she wants to even get kissed and even getting her photo taken. I don't think so.
Maybe not.
I think you need to read the room personally. If you're a street photographer, you need to go, what's the feels here?
Sure.
And, maybe you ask and maybe not.
I will always ask if I think the shot's so good that I'm going to want to be able to try to sell it. I will always ask then. But for shots like these, like this is a wonderful shot of the streetcar tracks in Lisbon. There's a person in the shot, but because he's not the focus of the shot, you wouldn't have to ask them.
You wouldn't have to
permission.
run up and ask him or anything.
We've talked a little bit about the rules of photography in various places, and in this situation, you don't really have to. If the person's face isn't recognizable, you don't have to worry about taking their shot in public. So if they have their back to you, or it's a blurry reflection in a window, or off in the distance like that shot, it's not really a concern. You really don't have to worry too much about it. MacMan says, for me, there's a personal line I know not to cross when shooting in public. Yeah, and that line may change depending on where you are. I've said before, I have this really weird thing about not being able to talk to people when I'm just by myself and shooting. I can't take portrait shots when I'm by myself. I don't feel comfortable walking up to someone and saying, "Excuse me, would you mind if I take your picture?" Because I think part of it is because I don't want to look like a creep. I don't want to look like some big giant pervert wanting to take pictures. But if I'm with somebody, I can say, "Hey, we are shooting. We are taking photos of people, and would you mind if I took your shot?" And I have no problem doing that.
No.
It's interesting that my line depends on who's with me, how brave I am, I guess, and what I'm willing to do and what I'm willing to shoot. Mm-hmm. I will never shoot children without the parents' permission.
No, you shouldn't.
Even though it's legal.
You still shouldn't.
You just don't. Unless the kids are off in the distance.
Or the parents are there waving and going, "Oh," and then you take their picture and they're still fine with you taking their picture.
And don't worry about the language barrier. The language barrier, we're going to be in Portugal. It's Portuguese. There are all kinds of apps out there that can help you. But for the most part, if you've got a camera, if you just sort of smile at the person, point to your camera and point to them, they'll tell you. They'll shake their head or they'll give you a little smile. And as soon as they smile, be ready to take the shot. Don't waste their time. Be ready to take the shot. Because the other thing is, depending on the kind of photographer you are, I don't want them to pose for me. I saw them in their natural state. I want to shoot them in their natural state. So I don't want someone to have enough time to get themselves together and give me a fake sort of smile.
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes you don't want them to know. You might want to go up to them after and say, "I took this photograph of you. Can I? Because you might not asking them could break a moment of getting a great shot.
Yes. That's always the tug and pull of street photography. Is if you ask, as Melissa said, you break maybe you break the magic of that moment of the shot. That person was lost in thought, or they were looking off in the distance.
Or a beautiful laugh or something.
Yeah,
and you just want
exactly.
to take them.
Exactly. So there's all kinds of different ways of doing this. Monty says, Sean, the day in Portland where you and I went to the Riverwalk area and shot, there was a cute kid playing with a dog in the fountain. I wouldn't have asked his adult if I could take his picture if I was by myself. But you and I together made it less creepy. I think that's true. It would be considered less creepy. MacMan, when I was at that event where I saw the B-29 flying, there was a World War II vet who got choked up after the plane landed and was taxiing by the display area. It would have made a great photo. I didn't feel right in taking it. Now, that's interesting.
Well, that's because that's his emotion. That was his. He was in emotion, and so I don't know. I think maybe people are uncomfortable being vulnerable like that. That's vulnerable.
See, now, I think I would have taken the shot if I could have gotten the shot that I imagined in my head from MacMan's description. If I could have gotten a shot of him with his medals and his hat, his hat on, his medals, and the full uniform type thing, with something, and this is the way I'm envisioning it in my head, with something in the background to let you know you were at a event, I might have taken the picture. Like there's an old plane in the background sort of thing. I might have taken that picture.
Do you remember that beautiful Life magazine photograph of that African-American man at Martin Luther King's funeral? Do you remember? And he was in his full uniform. I'm not quite sure. He was part of the band.
Yep.
Maybe he had, I think he was playing the accordion. Anyway, he was just crying. Do you remember that photograph?
Yep. A powerful photograph.
Very powerful. I'm loving all the shadows.
That's
Some
the other thing about
amazing
street photography.
shots, yeah.
Is it doesn't have to be people. Maybe you're not comfortable shooting people. Maybe you don't like to shoot people. You can also just look for other things like this example of the tracks. There's a bunch of shots that I've envisioned in Lisbon that I want to take pictures of. The trams, or the world famous trams in Lisbon, the tile work on the ground. Here's a shot of one of the. This is the famous Tram 28, which we will travel several times in Lisbon. I love the black and white play on this one, of the light on the right hand side and the streetcar. Someone looking at you in the picture, but it's still more about the streetcar than it is about the person in the picture. There's all kinds of great images of Lisbon that can be shot in color or black and white, and will really give you an interesting sense. I can't see myself personally doing a lot of stuff in black and white in Lisbon, because to me Lisbon seems like such a bright, vibrant kind of city that the pictures I've seen already of them, I don't know if I'd want to, I think wash it out is the wrong way to describe it, but to take pictures that don't show all the wonderful color of this beautiful city. So that's just me personally. That's the way I feel about it. But certainly if you want to take black and white shots, you are more than welcome to. We'll actually do a little bit of a class on how to shoot in black and white when we are in Lisbon.